Today, we're diving into franchise law, specifically focusing on corporate franchises. What makes corporate franchises unique is how they establish a comprehensive system. This system weaves together several crucial elements: contracts, control mechanisms, brand protection measures, liability considerations, and termination procedures, all integrated into a single operating structure. Think of it as a carefully designed framework that helps ensure consistency, manage risks, and protect both the franchisor and franchisee. This structure is essential because it balances the need for brand integrity with operational flexibility, making it a key pillar for successful franchises. A franchise is essentially a business model where one company, known as the franchisor, allows another party, the franchisee, to use its brand name, business system, and operating methods. This isn't just about renting a name. It involves a detailed framework that the franchisee follows to run the business in a way that maintains consistency and quality. In return, the franchisee pays fees to the franchisor and agrees to ongoing oversight to ensure the brand standards are upheld. The key elements here are the brand recognition, the proven system, and the franchisor's control to maintain the business's integrity across different locations. Here, we're breaking down the core elements of a franchise relationship. At its heart, a franchise involves three main parties: the franchisor, the franchisee, and the consumer. The franchisor is the brand owner who controls the system and sets the operating standards. They develop the brand and the business model. The franchisee takes on the role of running the local business, following the franchisor's guidelines to maintain consistency and quality. Finally, the consumer is the end user who experiences the brand directly through the franchise location, receiving the goods or services provided. This system relies on a clear division of roles: brand ownership, local operation, and market interaction, working together to create a successful franchise network. When we talk about franchise law, the foundation of every franchise relationship is a written agreement. This document clearly sets out the economic expectations between the franchisor and franchisee, the rights each party has to operate, and the duration of the contract. One of the key elements in this agreement is the fees involved. These include both the initial payment made to start the franchise and any ongoing royalties or fees that the franchisee must pay over time. Next is the territory clause, which defines where the franchisee is allowed to operate. This ensures clarity about geographical boundaries and protects both parties' interests. Duration is another crucial part of the agreement, covering how long the franchise term lasts, conditions for renewal, and how either party can exit the contract. Overall, these contract issues form the foundation of the franchise relationship, helping to establish clear rules and expectations that guide the partnership successfully. Now, let's delve into the critical components of a franchise agreement. First, we have the initial fees, which are the upfront costs a franchisee must pay to join the franchise system. These fees are essential because they cover the right to operate under the brand and access the initial training and support. Moving on to entry terms. These outline the conditions and requirements for becoming a franchisee, ensuring both parties understand their commitments from the start. Royalties come next, representing the ongoing payments the franchisee makes to the franchisor, typically calculated as a percentage of revenue. These royalties fund continued support and brand development. Speaking of support, training and system guidance are crucial components. The franchisor provides comprehensive training to help franchisees operate successfully, along with ongoing system support to maintain consistent standards. Operating standards and brand consistency are fundamental because they protect the franchise's reputation and ensure customers have a uniform experience across all locations. Finally, the agreement addresses economics, control, and performance metrics. This section sets expectations for financial performance and operational control, balancing the franchisor's need for quality and the franchisee's business autonomy. Understanding these components helps clarify the structure and responsibilities embedded in a franchise agreement. When we talk about franchise law, a key focus is intellectual property and how it protects the brand. The franchise's value largely comes from assets like trademarks, trade dress, operating methods, and licensed goodwill. These are what make a franchise recognizable and worth copying. At the core, the franchisee is essentially purchasing the right to use a protected brand identity. The primary tools that safeguard this identity include marks, detailed manuals, trade dress, and controlled know-how. Why does this matter? Because maintaining consistency across all locations is crucial for preserving consumer trust. The brand itself becomes an asset, licensed for use under strict controls. The protected elements typically include the name, the trademark or mark, the distinctive look or trade dress, and the goodwill associated with the brand. These combined give the franchise its unique presence in the market and ensure that every location offers a consistent consumer experience. Now let's dive into some critical intellectual property issues within franchises. First, trademarks are essential. They help maintain brand consistency, ensuring customers recognize and trust the franchise. The licensed use of these trademarks must be carefully controlled to protect the brand's reputation, which brings us to quality control measures. These standards are crucial for preserving the franchise's value. Next, copyrights come into play, especially with manuals, training materials, and advertising assets. These elements need protection to prevent unauthorized copying, which could dilute the franchise's uniqueness. Trade secrets are another vital aspect. These include proprietary recipes, methods, and confidential systems that give a franchise its competitive edge. It's important to safeguard these secrets, not just during the franchise relationship, but also after a franchisee exits, to prevent misuse. Overall, ownership, access, and protection of these IP elements form the foundation of a strong franchise system. Without effective management of these issues, the brand's strength and value could be seriously compromised. When we talk about liability allocation in corporate franchises, it's important to understand who is responsible when things go wrong. The franchisor, who controls the brand, aims to protect the overall reputation without being automatically responsible for every local issue. On the other hand, the franchisee operates the business independently and manages day-to-day activities on the ground. However, the franchisee is still accountable for how the business is run locally, meaning they answer for any claims related to their operations. This balance helps ensure the brand stays strong while placing responsibility where the actual control lies. When we talk about franchise law and liability, the key issue often boils down to control, agency, and who created the risk in the first place. Liability is usually determined by examining these factors. The first standard we consider is actual control. If a franchisor exercises real control over the operations, that can create a legal duty, meaning they might be held responsible for certain actions or harms. The second standard involves agency. This means that agency relationships can extend liability beyond just the individual operator. If someone is acting as an agent of the franchisor, liability can follow accordingly. The third standard revolves around negligence, which is all about foreseeability and prevention. Liability often depends on whether the harm was foreseeable and whether reasonable steps were taken to prevent it. Ultimately, understanding who controls the operation is crucial, because control usually shapes who is legally responsible for any harm that occurs. This framework helps clarify when a franchisor might be held liable versus when the responsibility lies with the franchisee. Now let's dive into the balance that exists within franchise law. On one side, we have the franchisor's control requirements. These include maintaining brand standards, ensuring consistent operating procedures, and overseeing quality to protect the overall brand reputation. This level of control is essential to keep the franchise network unified and reliable. On the other side, there are the franchisee's needs for independence. Franchisees require local management discretion to adapt to their specific markets effectively. They also operate as separate legal entities and need entrepreneurial incentives to stay motivated and drive success. The key challenge lies in balancing these two aspects, allowing enough franchisor control to maintain a cohesive brand, while granting sufficient franchisee independence to encourage innovation and local responsiveness. Understanding and managing this balance is crucial for the health and growth of any franchise system. On this slide, we're focusing on termination rights and the key triggers that can lead to ending a franchise agreement. First, breaches of the agreement are critical. If a franchisee fails to adhere to operational reporting or brand standards, this can activate default and cure rights. Essentially, they might get a chance to fix the issue, but it puts them at risk. Next, non-performance is another major factor. If a franchise consistently falls short of system standards, quality controls, or performance metrics, it can justify termination to protect the overall brand. Finally, financial default plays a big role. Missing royalty payments, outstanding fees, insolvency, or other monetary problems often lead to immediate exposure to termination. Understanding these triggers helps both franchisors and franchisees manage expectations and responsibilities effectively. Now, let's talk about the common triggers that can lead to the termination of a franchise agreement. First and foremost, non-payment of fees is a major issue. If a franchisee fails to meet their financial obligations, it can seriously jeopardize the partnership. Next, operational default is another critical factor. This refers to the franchisee not adhering to the agreed-upon operational standards or failing to carry out essential business activities. Third, brand standard violations are taken very seriously because maintaining consistency is key to a franchise's reputation. Any breaches here can result in termination. Lastly, more severe circumstances, such as fraud, insolvency, or abandonment of the business, are clear grounds for termination. These triggers are important because they protect both the franchisor's brand and the overall integrity of the franchise system. Understanding these helps clarify what behaviors or situations are unacceptable and why termination might be necessary. When a franchise relationship comes to an end, it's important to understand that certain obligations don't just disappear. The exit process is carefully structured to ensure everything is handled in an orderly and enforceable way. First, the return of materials is critical. This includes manuals, customer lists, signage, and any proprietary operating documents. These must all be handed back to protect. When franchise disputes arise, they generally follow one of two main paths, either public court litigation or private alternative dispute resolution. The first path, litigation, takes place in public courts with formal procedures like discovery and motion practice. This route can result in judicial remedies such as damages, injunctions, or fee awards. However, it tends to be slower, more expensive, and more visible to the market. The second path involves arbitration or mediation. Mediation aims to reach a negotiated settlement through dialogue, while arbitration results in a binding decision made by an arbitrator. These processes are usually more private and governed by contracts rather than court rules. They also help reduce uncertainty regarding timing, the venue, and procedures. Ultimately, the choice between these forums greatly impacts leverage, cost, confidentiality, and the types of remedies available. Understanding these differences is essential for effectively managing franchise conflicts. When we talk about franchise liability, it really boils down to how much control the franchisor has over the franchisee's operations. The key question is whether the franchisor is simply protecting the brand or actually controlling day-to-day activities. First, with a parent agency, if the franchise outlet looks like it's company-run, customers might reasonably believe the franchisor is responsible for what happens there. That perception can create liability. Second, operational control is a big factor. If the franchisor has detailed oversight over things like hiring, safety protocols, training, or daily procedures, it becomes easier to claim that they directed any harm that occurs. Third, negligent standards come into play when the franchisor's system rules or inspection requirements are themselves unsafe or poorly designed. In that case, the franchisor's liability risk increases because they set those standards. Finally, direct participation matters a lot. If the franchisor personally approves, supervises, or intervenes in specific actions, it becomes much harder for them to avoid liability. So the crucial point is that brand consistency alone typically isn't enough to create liability. It's meaningful control over the franchisee's conduct that really opens the door to risk. When we talk about franchise law, the main focus is on regulatory compliance, which operates at several levels: federal, state, and local. At the federal level, The FTC franchise rule is especially important because it sets disclosure obligations that franchisors must meet to ensure transparency for potential franchisees. Moving to the state level, registration statutes come into play, which require franchisors to register their franchise offerings before selling them in certain states. Another critical area involves relationship and termination laws, which govern how franchisors and franchisees interact and under what conditions a franchise agreement can be ended. Locally, zoning and permitting regulations impact where a franchise can operate, while health, labor, and signage rules ensure franchises comply with community standards and workplace requirements. Understanding and adhering to all these layers of regulation is essential for maintaining compliance and operating a successful franchise. On this slide, we're focusing on the critical regulations surrounding franchise disclosure, which can vary significantly from state to state. First, it's essential that the disclosure documents are delivered to the prospective franchisee well in advance of any contract signing or payment. This advanced delivery ensures the prospect has ample time to review and understand the terms. Secondly, the disclosure must clearly outline all material terms. This includes fees, the territory where the franchise will operate, renewal rights, any restrictions, and provisions related to default. Transparency here is key to building trust and avoiding future disputes. Lastly, the disclosure needs to address the franchise's risk history. This encompasses information on any litigation, bankruptcy, or financial performance claims relevant to the franchise, and these items are scrutinized differently depending on the state. Understanding these compliance points helps ensure that the franchise process adheres to all legal requirements and protects both parties involved. When we talk about franchise viability, it's important to understand that sustainable franchises rely on 5 key disciplines working together, not just one. First, protecting intellectual property is crucial. This means safeguarding trademarks, know-how, and consistent brand usage across every location to maintain a unified identity. Next, clear documentation sets the foundation, defining standards, rights, fees, and operational expectations from the start helps avoid confusion as the franchise grows. Then, training programs play a vital role. Consistent onboarding, operations, and compliance training ensure that every franchise operates the same way, maintaining quality and reliability. Regular audits are also essential. They help monitor quality, reporting, and legal compliance early so that small issues don't escalate into bigger problems. Lastly, effective support systems provide ongoing guidance, field support, and open communication, which keep franchisees aligned and the system strong. These interlocking controls collectively create durable, steady growth that's sustainable over time. On this slide, we take a closer look at the franchise journey, which unfolds in 5 distinct phases. Starting with formation, this is where the legal groundwork is laid, and initial decisions set the foundation for everything that follows. Next is launch, the critical phase where your franchise comes to life, facing early operational challenges and opportunities. Then we move into operation, where day-to-day management, performance, and fine-tuning take center stage. Growth follows, focusing on scaling the business, increasing market presence, and enhancing value. Finally, the exit phase represents a possible transition, whether that's selling, franchising further, or other forms of exit strategies. Throughout these phases, the balance of risk, control, and value shifts significantly, influencing decisions and outcomes. The key pillars to manage at each stage are structure, ensuring the right legal and organizational frameworks, performance, driving operational success, and transition, planning for the eventual next step in the franchise lifecycle. Understanding this journey helps us navigate challenges and seize opportunities effectively at every milestone. As we wrap up, let's focus on a few key themes that define successful franchising. First, franchising is all about partnership, growth, and stewardship. It's a shared system with shared standards that everyone commits to uphold. This balance is crucial because franchising manages risk while offering the potential to scale rewards significantly. But it also demands disciplined responsibility from all parties involved. The strongest franchise systems are those that align brand control, legal structures, and shared accountability seamlessly, creating a foundation for sustainable success. This closing perspective highlights how these elements work together to build a thriving franchise network.